Women in the northwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, one of the two English-speaking regions hit by 4-year-long armed conflict, continue mounting pressure on both parties in the socio-political and security crisis in view of finding a way out of the troubled waters in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. They were speaking in a public manifestation in the town of Bamenda, northwest region. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime news hour on Équinoxe Television, live from my headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Bable Jonathan, and we're going to begin this newscast in the crisis-hit northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon. And women, particularly those in the northwest region, have continued mounting pressure on all parties involved in the socio-political and security tensions, rendering those regions very difficult for inhabitants to live in. And of course, this has been pulling on for close to 4 years, or more than 4 years today. And the women have said they will not stop until solutions are provided, lasting solutions to the bloodshed, the killings, destruction of properties, abduction, and other atrocities being committed within the framework of the Anglophone crisis. They were speaking during a manifestation in the town of Bamenda. Details with Fomi Armstrong Sander.
The brutal assassination of 3 traditional rulers in the Libialem division, the torture of Jean Mbungong in Du subdivision, and other related atrocities recently committed in the crisis-hit northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon has once again brought them to their morning space at the Commercial Avenue in Bamenda, northwest region.
Yes, Lord, we believe that the devil can do us more, because we are sitting.
They are concerned mothers from all angles of the northwest region, broken by the suffering and killings of their children, husbands and loved ones, trapped in an unending armed conflict in the 2 Anglophone regions.
You are vocal, you are hiding place. Here we are, Lord. Father, take all the glory.
Like in an altar of all nations, the women in different languages lamented, cried, and asked God to end the war which they say has brought untold suffering to the regions.
Whether we are seeing it with our physical eyes or we are not seeing, one thing I believe is that God is in absolute control.
After presenting their case to God, the women also demanded belligerent parties to end the war now. This is one of the many outings staged by these never-give-up women who say they will continue to press on until the war is over.
And the Minister of Territorial Administration of the Republic of Cameroon, Tanganji Paul, reiterates government's call on separatist fighters or pro-independence fighters to drop the guns and come out of the bushes and return to the normal life trend so that peace can return to the crisis-hit northwest and southwest regions of the country. Minister Tanganji Paul was speaking after having received the renovated building of the Bafut Divisional Office. It is, of course, in the northwest region of the country. And Bustela fires in details from Bamenda. Bustela with details of Minister Tanganji Paul's visit to Bafut, one of the localities hardest hit by the more than 4-year-long armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. He went there on high instructions, as he indicated, on high instructions of the head of state within the framework of efforts to restore peace and normalcy in the crisis-stricken regions of the country. And he received the newly renovated building of the Bafut Divisional Office. That building was burnt down in 2018. Bustela reports.
About 2 years ago, persons believed to be the separatist fighters burned down this structure. It hosted the services of the Bafut Subdivisional Officer's Office. According to Paul Otanganji, Cameroon's Minister of Territorial Administration, all attempts to reconstruct that structure were futile as contractors were scared of the security climate in Bafut.
Most of the businessmen were not available to do the reconstruction work. Most of them were not available to do the renovations.
Minister Paul Otanganji was in Bafut to evaluate work done by the 3rd Rapid Intervention Battalion in getting the structure usable again.
I'm so impressed because we have some innovations like all this, the police, yes, where they can stand. Yes, and think that it's something which is an innovation. You see that when you sit there, you can see at a distance, we can say more than 10 kilometers. So when you see the enemy coming, they can recognize the enemy. So I think that this is a sign that within the military and the civilians, we have a good partnership.
Since his installation in July 2020, Diobe Elomba Didakos, Divisional Officer for Bafut, is yet to effectively discharge his duties from his office in Bafut. Although renovated, the office is lacking in office equipment. Bafut has been one of the hotspots in the Northwest region since pro-independence fighters picked up arms, with many gun battles reported as they regularly clash with government forces. As consequences, Bafut is deserted, with her rich agricultural and touristic potentials losing their relevance. While viewing these arms said to have been recovered by security forces acting on a hint from an unknown individual in Lower Bafut, Minister Paul Otanganji calls on the population to collaborate with the forces whom he says have been deployed for their safety.
And besides security crisis affecting Cameroon from the north to the south, east to west, corruption is another major problem, another serious cankerworm, becoming just too difficult for public authorities to crack. And despite all the efforts made by the different institutions created by governments to fight corruption, it continues persisting and even growing in the country. And it is within this framework that some 39 newly appointed and promoted custom officials or officers in the Southwest region have been warned against corruption, and this warning came during the oath-taking ceremony, notably in the Limbe Court of First Instance. Details in this report.
Cameroon Customs undoubtedly is among the most corrupt public sector, with the government losing hundreds of millions of CFA francs in revenue collection. To check this cankerworm of corruption, the government and the customs sector in particular has put in place mechanisms to curb this ill. Swearing in some 39 customs officers at the Limbe Court of First Instance, the Learned State Council Mba Azeme Aurelien reminded them of the oath taken.
You shall be aware of the fact that your capacity as a civil servant shall aggravate your criminal responsibility. You shall be liable to criminal prosecution.
The presiding magistrate, president of the court, His Worship Valerie Akunda Samanti, used the occasion to call on them to do their job diligently.
That your functions are considered by law so sacrosanct that they must not only be covered by the oath, but they must be seen to be covered by the oath.
According to the magistrate, oath taken by custom officers is unique to that of other public court.
The mention of the oath on the letters of commission is peculiar to the customs service. Law attaches grave importance to the credibility, the honesty of a custom officer.
It was an opportunity for the Learned State Council to appeal to the public to show disrespect to customs officers.
Custom officials are under the special protection of the law. It is especially forbidden to all physical or moral, civil or military person to abuse them.
On their part, they promise to bring out the best in them in the discharge of their duties.
Promise to work harder for the accomplishment of our duties and to be at the service of the state.
We promise to do our work
in conformity with the Cameroon Republic law.
The oath taking upgrades the custom officers to the rank of judicial police. The event was witnessed by Southwest Customs Chief of Sector, the administration, family members, among others.
Custom officials being commissioned to their functions in the town of Limbe. Thanks, Davidson Maimo, for that report. Taxi drivers, car owners, bike owners, city dwellers in the country's economic capital, Douala in general, are lamenting over the growing insecurity across the town. In several parts of the town of Douala, people are attacked in the day, and in the night, their belongings taken away, many of them deprived of motorcycles and even vehicles. And this is happening almost every day in the town of Douala. And security officials in the meantime are intensifying the fight against crime wave in the town of Douala. Recently, 2 persons who stole a car from, or who are said to have stolen a car from a taxi driver were arrested, and they were presented to the public at the judicial police in Bonanjo. They allegedly stole a car from a taxi driver. Details in this report by Smanji Kangere.
It was another busy day at the premises of the judicial police station in Bonanjo, Douala. A car that was forcefully taken by alleged thieves on September 30, 2020 at Nyala met its owner this Wednesday. It was at the MTN office in Aqua that we negotiated our price, 3,000 francs per hour.
Il avait un truc à prendre à Nyala. Et il faudrait que je l'amène au fret.
He told me he has been recently transferred to Douala. We then moved to the airport to transfer a package, but unfortunately, we couldn't do the transaction.
Il y a assez de monde pour envoyer le courrier. Il faut qu'on patiente. Et j'ai supporté.
The two accused in the act during their presentation didn't deny their crimes, even though one says he will readily speak out before a lawyer. He was the one who brought the vehicle with the man inside. We forced him out of his car and took it away. I came to Douala, hired him, then stole his vehicle. The act of stealing vehicles has become very rampant in Douala of recent, and the security officers are calling on the Douala inhabitants to live according to their means. I'm calling on all in Douala to be more vigilant and live according to their means. They should try to leave those who come and show up when they are having nothing in their pockets. The investigation that led to the capture of these two alleged car thieves was done by the head of the anti-gang unit at the judicial police station, Henry Nsama, under the supervision of the regional delegate of national security for Littoral.
With regards to the challenges faced by public health amenities across the Republic of Cameroon, challenges that are having an adverse impact on the quality of healthcare delivery in those health amenities, Parliament embarks on a follow-up and evaluation mission across the 10 regions in view of evaluating and taking stock of the actual situation and as far as the functioning of those hospitals are concerned and the delivery of healthcare in those hospitals, notably first and second category hospitals. Some delegations have been dispatched by the House Speaker Kabayege Jibril to take stock of the situation in first and second degree hospitals or category hospitals in different parts of the country. Here in the country's economic capital, some of the members of the parliament constituted in a delegation were in different first and second category hospitals in the town of Douala, including the General Hospital, including the Yassa Gyneco Obstetric and Pediatric Hospital, and of course the Lakentini Hospital. And they took stock of the situation and highlighted a number of challenges faced by those amenities, and also appreciated the work that has been done by the administrations of the different hospitals to improve on healthcare delivery. Take a listen to Honorable O.C. Joshua. He's a member of the delegation.
We had it on the table of discussions today, and we're very happy that Professor Isomba was able to get rid of it. And what is happening right now is that people come to the Hospital Lakentini and get treated. I don't want to make a big publicity so that people don't believe that it is free of charge. But people today come and are treated as they get in. I would like to say we are here as MPs, so we are also here to verify what the management has explained to us. So if there are any other cases of complications, but I can tell you, and there is absolutely no reason why I should have a doubt on it, he reassured us that everything has been changed at the level of your acceptance into the hospital. They don't ask you for money before you come in, they ask you for money once you have received your first aid or your first treatment. So that's a very, very big improvement, and I want to say it's probably the only hospital in Cameroon that does this.
And we asked Honorable O.C. Joshua what they discussed with the administration of the Lakentini Hospital of Douala with regards to some specific problems highlighted by users or persons who seek the services of the Lakentini Hospital, notably the issue of what is known as the code, which has been posing a lot of problems to persons who go into the Lakentini Hospital seeking for one service or the other. And the Honorable Member of Parliament said that the administration has cleared the mess, so to speak. Listen to O.C. Joshua.
We are not here for an audit, we are not here for a parliamentary inquiry. We were here to listen and to see for ourselves and to report back to the rest of Parliament on the actual situation of these hospitals. We want to make sure that the financial package that is allocated for healthcare goes to these hospitals and is put in place in the interest of the population of Douala, because we're in Douala, and to the Cameroonian population as a whole. We were, together with the colleagues, impressed by what the management and the staff of these hospitals are doing, be it at Hôpital Général, be it at the pediatric hospital at Yassa, and especially here in a very difficult hospital called Lakentini, because you know it's the biggest hospital in Central Africa. It's 800 beds, it's 1,200 staff. It's not an easy place. It's in the center of a very busy town, and we're impressed by the improvements being brought about by the management. There is a problem with capacity. There is a problem with the technical platforms in our hospitals. You kind of have a tendency of inadequate equipment. So, for instance, an example right here in Lakentini is that they have a constant demand of about 20 incubators for premature babies, but they have just 10 available. That's a point that we need to raise. They also have a problem with energy. When you have, you don't want to be on an operation table when there is no electricity, which means that they need to ramp up their capacity, generation capacity, self-reliant generation capacity. That needs to be done as well as a matter of urgency. And then there are many other points. My colleague was just talking about the capacity. You know, in Cameroon we have just one unit that is able to do radiotherapy for cancer patients. That is the General Hospital of Douala, and that's the only unit in the whole of Central Africa. And we learned that their capacity to perform such treatments is coming to a stop in the coming weeks. So as a matter of urgency, we need to to address that issue. So there are many such points that we will address in our report, and we'll make sure, or we will hold the government accountable for rapid and urgent measures to be taken so that people don't die in hospitals, people get cured in hospitals.
Sorry for the little mix-up there. In the first extract, you listened to Honorable O.C. Joshua talking about the health delivery situation of the first and second category hospitals in the town of Douala, and highlighting the challenges that the hospitals are facing, and promising that they were going to continue mounting pressure as members of parliament on the government to solve some of those problems in order to improve on healthcare delivery. Also appreciating the work that is being done by health officials in the respective hospitals to improve on the quality of healthcare delivery. And in the second excerpt there that you heard, he was talking about the specific problem in the Lakentini Hospital of Douala. Now on to something else. As the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic continues killing in thousands across the world, there are divergent and convergent views that are being expressed by health experts, health officials, government officials across the world concerning some measures that are to be put in place in order to curb the spread of the virus and its deadly impact on human life, as well as the economies of countries around the world. And one of such measures is the possible establishment of a vaccine passport, a document that will show proof of whether you have been vaccinated or not as people travel from one part of the world to the other. Katsuri News.
Across Europe, people are protesting against COVID restrictions. Lockdowns, curfews, masks, the list goes on. But in Denmark, hundreds took to the streets for a measure not yet implemented: vaccine passports. After a year of lockdowns and restricted travel, COVID-19 vaccinations have given us light at the end of the tunnel. But mass vaccination won't happen overnight. That's where vaccine passports could help. They're called a passport, but really they're just a certificate of vaccination. It could allow people to travel. It could also incentivize people to get the jab, since vaccination is not mandatory anywhere. So why are people against it? Right now, the official messaging on how valid or useful vaccine passports are is a little confusing. The EU supports the introduction of a vaccine passport.
It is absolutely necessary if you have been vaccinated to have a certificate. This is a medical necessity.
The WHO is supposedly against it, but it will collaborate on a digital vaccination certificate with Estonia. Regardless, vaccine passports are already becoming mainstream. In November, Qantas announced that they would only allow vaccinated passengers on board. But vaccine passports raise legitimate concerns. First, over their efficacy. Vaccines prevent COVID, but nothing yet proves that it prevents transmission. That's why the WHO is against vaccine passport. Also, it may create two kinds of citizens, with those vaccinated having the right to enter public spaces, and those who don't want to get the jab or simply can't have access to it, well, it would restrict their freedoms.
Either you decide that it must be compulsory to be vaccinated, or you...
Talking point. Thank you for staying with us in this edition of Talking Points. Joining us from South Africa, Professor Henry Fomundam. He is a pharmaceutical care and public health expert with many years of experience working in several countries across the African continent in the areas of academia and public health programs. He served as a member of the National Clinical Trials Committee at the Medicine Regulatory Authority in South Africa for over 6 years. Professor, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Right, Prof, before we talk about the vaccine, I want to get your opinion on the issue of a vaccine passport.
Well, I heard about that. So the issue of a vaccine passport is it's going to happen. And that's because right now it's a choice for people to take the vaccine or not. but you cannot not want to take the vaccine and then you put other people at risk. So all they're going to tell you is that for you to travel from one country to the next, you will need a vaccine passport so you don't expose other people. And I heard your reporter talk about the fact that the vaccines haven't proven if they can prevent transmission. Well, that's one part of it, but if everybody on the flight has a vaccine passport, it means you shouldn't be worried about transmission, because you will not be able to transmit to anybody, to the person sitting next to you, and that person will not be able to give you either. So a vaccine passport is going to become a reality, because those who are taking the vaccine and those who don't want to take the vaccine, you cannot put other people at risk.
Right. Now, can you tell us what was the level of progress so far as the vaccination around the world is concerned, in Africa in particular?
Well, that's a very good question. A number of things that have happened. The second wave, which occurred in many countries, seems to be coming down at this time in a lot of the European and perhaps even in the US. In Africa, it's probably a different story, and that's because people have become very complacent in Africa. Part of it is because of the data that is coming out of Africa. So far, up to date, we have less than 4 million people that have been infected, a little over 100,000 that have died. That picture looks very good. But that picture is not very accurate, because we know from a lot of other countries that people who have symptoms of COVID don't go to the hospital in most of the African countries. So it becomes very difficult for national authorities to gather this kind of data. And so one of the suggestions that I have is, which we've been discussing, is that African countries will have to depend on what they call mathematical modeling or statistical modeling, which means you take into consideration that there are many people who don't come to the hospital, and then you're able to give them, and they do a calculation and tell you that in Cameroon, instead of 34,000 people that may have been infected, based on the mathematical modeling, we can put it about maybe 60,000 or 70,000. So that's going to be an assumption that you make, but it will be a better assumption than to have underreporting. And part of it has resulted into prevention measures, the mask and the social distancing not taking place throughout most of Africa. Except in countries like South Africa, that they try to enforce it, because South Africa is almost 50% of what is being reported on the entire continent. So there are a number of things that are going on. We even see countries like Tanzania officially not accepting that there's COVID, which is a major problem. So Africa still needs a lot of work to do.
All right, Prof, the second wave of the coronavirus is proving to be more deadly. What can we say about the probability of a more catastrophic or a more devastating situation as far as the second wave is concerned?
Well, that's true, particularly for the African countries. In the European and in the countries and in the US, because they've suffered the major tolls of economic toll and the number of the mortality, the number of people who died, they've been very aggressive in trying to manage it. But like I said, the data that we're having out of Africa, it's good data that we don't have too many people that are infected, but I don't think it's accurate data, because we have difficulties with the infrastructure of actually capturing the number of cases. That's why I recommend what I'm recommending right now for statistical modeling or mathematical modeling, to be able to predict what are the numbers that we're actually talking about in the various African countries. And so with the vaccine, a lot of the rich countries in the world have already started taking the vaccines, and very few African countries. South Africa just started because of some of the challenges that they had. So African countries are going to be last in this, and because of that, if we don't improve on the prevention measures, we're going to have the mortality, the number of people dying, that's going to go up.
South Africa, and there's a new variant which started there and is now spreading to some other African countries. About 4 or more countries are now recording cases of coronavirus of the South African variant. Can you tell us more about this South African variant?
Well, yes, I think we spoke about it last time. Having a variant with a viral infection is expected. So people have been monitoring it like we spoke about last time because viruses keep multiplying, keep replicating. And so you get a point where there's mutation that occurs, and it could mutate into what you call a variant, which means it's changed a little bit, but still maintaining the major properties of the original virus. It sometimes could go to the point where it becomes a new strain. But right now in South Africa, we have a new variant, which is similar, which is the UK has a new variant, Brazil has a new variant. The variant in South Africa has been found in many states in the US. It's in many countries in Africa, although African countries do not do the genomic sequencing. That is going to be very critical. For you to start knowing what vaccine is best for you to use, you must be able to do a genomic sequencing. So the variant in South Africa has become the predominant variant. In 90% of the transmission that we have is this particular variant. And we're now seeing that the variant may not necessarily respond to some of the vaccines that we were thinking about before. And so it's going to be very critical that every African country that wants to initiate and get a vaccine, we have about 9 vaccines that have been approved in different countries in the world. And so the selection process, you must consider efficacy depending on what variant you have, and then you have to consider the safety of that particular vaccine that you have. So these are 2 issues that each country must put into place. South Africa is doing exactly that. And so you must have heard from the news that South Africa ordered 1 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. And when it got to South Africa, because that study had been done before South Africa had the new variant, South Africa now tested the vaccine against its new variant. And the efficacy had dropped significantly to about 22–25%. So they have 1 million doses that they cannot use because the efficacy is low. Now they've turned to Johnson & Johnson, which is the next vaccine that they're going to be using, with an efficacy that is about 57%. So that's much better than the 22%. That would be what each and every African country has to figure out a way to work together with your partners or WHO assisting. So let's know what variant you have in the country so you can make a decision on what vaccine to get. The Russians have a vaccine, China has a vaccine, a number of people have a vaccine. The Russian vaccine, most of the South American countries are buying that. So each and every country, including Cameroon, your regulatory authority has to put a number of things in place to make a decision on which vaccine that Cameroon is going to be getting.
African countries seem to be progressing at a slow pace as far as the vaccination is concerned. In Cameroon, for example, the Minister of Public Health recently said that the epidemiological situation of the country gives reasons to wait a little bit as far as the vaccination is concerned. What's your take about this slow progress of African countries with regards to the vaccination, the anti-COVID-19 vaccination?
So here's what African countries need to do, because you're going to be getting the vaccine late anyway, because most of the rich countries, because of vaccine nationalism, are able to buy the vaccines before the African countries. African countries have 3 ways of getting the vaccine: through WHO, through the AU, and then your bilateral discussions. Now, this is the time for each and every African country to be able to put together the infrastructure and the system to order the vaccine. Because herd immunity is what we're looking for. Herd immunity requires about 70–75%. Let's say 70% of the population of Cameroon. That puts it maybe close to 18 million people. And you can subtract 2 million for being pregnant or very young children. You have to figure out how to give a vaccine to 15 million people. That infrastructure is very challenging. Now, there are a number of things that when you want to administer in a program like that, you look at affordability, which means WHO is going to have to help out, so you can afford it. The AstraZeneca vaccine was the cheapest, which is what WHO wanted, $4 per dose. Johnson & Johnson is about $10 per dose. So that's affordable for African countries with help from other organizations. So you look at the affordability, Then you look at the access to it. When the drug gets to Cameroon, at the airport in Cameroon, where do you store the medications? Most of them are going to be stored in the refrigerator. Do you have that infrastructure in place in all the regions? How are you going to move the drugs from Douala or Yaoundé airport to all the regions in the country? Where are you going to store the drugs? Have you trained the healthcare workers? We've seen it even in the US that they've wasted some of the products because you made a decision that 40 people are going to come take the vaccine today. You take them out of the fridge, then 20 people show up. And once you've taken them out of the fridge and kept them out for long, you cannot put them back. Some of the vaccines stay at room temperature for 6 hours, some for 12 hours, some for 2 hours. So all of these calculations have to be done now, at this time, so that you can even do a drill, a dry run, to see, are we able to get this vaccine throughout the country? So these are the challenges that we have. And so when I hear the government saying, we're going to wait, you can't wait, because you have to start reviewing your infrastructure, making sure that the people, the facilities are ready, the people are ready. The thing about hesitancy, it's changing in the world. We need to make sure that it's also changing in Cameroon, that people are educated and understand the reason why they want to take the vaccine, so that all of this is done before you even procure the vaccine. So you cannot wait.
In many African countries, there is a major problem of infrastructure, health infrastructure, and mechanisms that are supposed to be in place to make sure that the drugs that are coming into the countries, notably as far as the vaccine is concerned, go through all the procedures, all the channels that you indicated earlier, to guarantee the health of the population who will consume that vaccine?
Most African countries, Cameroon inclusive, may not necessarily have the infrastructure to do a proper analysis on a vaccine, to look at the quality of the vaccine. So they rely on WHO, you rely on reputable regulatory authorities like the FDA, the UK, the MRA in the UK, when they approve these drugs. And then you are able to say, well, if it's been cleared by WHO that has the expertise, or by the UK or by the US, then we think the vaccine is good. But you cannot end there, because you get to a point where African countries begin to buy medicines and perhaps vaccines from countries that their regulatory authority is not very reputable. Then that's when you start running into issues of counterfeit. So at this moment, when they're waiting, there are lots of things that have to happen in the country. You need to create a technical expert committee that can review documents, interact with the US, interact with WHO. These are reputable organizations that will be of help, because not every batch, because we have like 9 vaccines in the market, Cameroon will not have the ability to test most of them. So that's how you're able to collaborate to make sure that you're getting the best for the country.
The communication going on everywhere, on the media, on the mainstream media, on social media, social networks, and even in the quarters and so on, there are still people who say coronavirus is fake. It does not exist. What do you have to say to such people?
Well, not to the people. It first is to the way we package information. We had a similar problem with HIV. I mean, there were messages everywhere, but by the time we woke up, 70% of the HIV cases in the world are in Africa. In 1984, it was probably about 10% of the cases. 10 years, 12 years after that, 70% of it is in Africa. So there is a two-way process. You must package your messages appropriately. You must engage the community leaders and the local leaders. So the mechanism of actually engaging your population, it should be designed and known, and not wait for when you have a pandemic, then you start running around trying to inform people. And just messages on CRTV or on the media is not enough. You have to be able to get into the community. You have to identify community leaders. You have to be able to work through them. And so that's the problem that we have with most of the African countries. They have pamphlets that have come from WHO, they have radio programs. That is never enough in terms of talking to your populace in how to change behavior, because that's what you're trying to do. There's health education, health literacy talks that you have to organize, and all of this requires good leadership for you to be able to do that.
Professor Henry Fomundam, pharmaceutical care and public health expert with many years of experience working in several African countries in the area of academia and public health programs. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Coming up next, Equinoxe.